As a next topic, we start with something that might be for you completely new. It's validation and pharma regulations. As I don't know who of you have already experience with pharma projects, hands up who is familiar with a bit. Okay, good. So when it comes to the topic of validation and validated environments, we have to know that validation is most widely known feature put in place at pharmaceuticals and other critical environmental locations. So validation is mainly driven by pharma customers who must comply with regulations coming from the Food and Drug Administration from the United States, as an example, the regulation that is applied on all around the world, because it's the standard. And although we have also in the EU the GMP, the good manufacturing practices, they are actually also based on the FDA regulations. Pretty similar, the wording is a bit different, but in the end, it's having the same goal. Regulations are actually consumer protections. So it's there to protect us consumers from bad quality. Meaning, if we have, for instance, a painkiller and the quality of this painkiller would vary, sometimes it would have maybe contain contamination. If the quality wouldn't be controlled, it could happen that instead of 500 milligrams active substance, we have 400 or 600 milligrams. So in order to protect the consumers, there are regulations, because in the past, one was of the opinion the market is regulating itself. Meaning, over time, the good ones will survive, the bad ones will die. Unfortunately, it has become apparent that this is not the case, because the companies who do less controls, less checks, actually can save money. So they are more profitable. Meaning over time they make more money and survive, whereas the ones who implement a lot of quality checks invest more money in the overall quality control, and also they need more employees. That's why their profit might be less than the ones who actually just reduce the quality controls and increase the risk. They just say, okay, let's manage the risk. If we have once in a while a person who suffers because it's bad quality, we just pay some money and that's it. So regulations have put in place to make sure that this doesn't happen anymore. For us, from Siemens, this means that we can support pharma customers, but also food and beverage manufacturers in the process to be compliant with the regulations. Now, what are typical use cases? What do the regulations actually tell the manufacturer to do? What is needed? A simple example is that we have a requirement that states whenever we do something, we change something in the product manufacturing, maybe we change the temperature set points and so on, it requires a comment before action. That means that we have to prevent unauthorized changes. And with that, when we read now between the lines, we can already imagine that we may no longer use generic user accounts. Because if we would just use an operator account operator, and every operator would log in with this account. We wouldn't have the chance to find out who has done what and why. Then the second example here, that we have to follow a certain standard. The GAMP 5, this is not a regulation, this is a guideline coming from the industry. It's an association that consists of different experts coming from pharmaceuticals, from manufacturers like Siemens, and they have written guidelines that a manufacturer can follow. So it's kind of good practices. And these guidelines help manufacturers to identify the critical parameters. Because when it comes to production, what we have to monitor and survey all the time is the temperature and humidity, as an example, but also access control to make sure that we know who entered the building and who is currently in and who left it. And we also have to control the access in terms of user access in our management station. So we should make sure that we use personalized accounts and that we manage them. If an employee quits the job, that this account is also immediately deleted and no longer active. And this is then logged in the so-called audit trail. The audit trail is kind of a log file that logs the activities in the system, what has happened when, and especially for the users, it's needed that we know who has done what and when. And with the comment you have to enter, we also know why we have maybe a change done in the past for the temperature set point. So track changes made to the system is the goal we want to achieve with the validation feature that we have now in Desigo CC version 3. I would like to show you quickly how I have prepared the training material, because this session is too short that I can explain everything. Especially, I do not mention here all the references to the sections in, for instance, the FDA 21 CFR Part 11. Doesn't make sense that we go through all the regulations, but you can use the notes pages as a refresher or to also do self-studies later on, should validation be a topic for you that you train afterwards to colleagues. I have also then prepared overview graphics, and later on you get handouts, two handouts. One is the so-called two-pager. I summarized on 2 pages with an overview graphic the essentials, the most important facts about validation, what it means. So if you review it, you get again back to, okay, this is what validation is and where I can apply it. And the second handout you get later on is also needed for the hands-on exercise, is the caution what needs to be considered, because to apply validation, to set the object into validation is that easy. You have seen this already before, and I show it again. When we select here an object like the driver, we go into the Object Configurator tab. Then we have here this section validation, and when I click on the drop-down list, I have okay, good. I have here the Object Configurator, and in the drop-down list we have 3 validation profiles available: the disabled, this is the default, enabled and supervised. And when I want to set now an object into validation, I just select the desired validation profile and save it, and that's it. So what we have to do in Desigo Zaeh is more than simple. What you need to do before you can do that is more difficult, and there is also where you need brain power. And we come to the process of how to actually configure validation later on. Let's first continue with the following slide here. I have here summarized where validation could be put in place. We talked already about the pharma customers, and this feature is also driven by pharma. However, we have also regulations for food and beverage, and we have also sometimes regulations for banks or museums, where we can also apply the validation feature. Now, when it comes to museums, you think, yeah, okay, is there a real regulation, a counter-regulation that forces you to actually activate the feature? Most probably not. But we can think about the example that we have in a museum a lot of paintings, valuable paintings, exceeding maybe the value of several millions. And of course, the insurance has a high interest that the museum also manages the risk and the security. So the insurance could, for instance, say, okay, we can insure all your paintings, but then you have to also make sure that you survey everything in a proper way, so that the intrusion detection system cannot just be deactivated. Instead, it needs a comment before executing the action, so that we know why the intrusion detection system has been deactivated, and especially that we know who has deactivated. And that's why what I mentioned before, validation means personalized accounts, and the actual not only recommendation, it's more like a must, is that we do no longer use the Desigo CC accounts. Instead, we use Windows accounts, because with Windows accounts we can apply a policy with the complexity of the password expiry, and so on. And we also have the Active Directory, so we can easily disable a user account, which is not possible with the Desigo CC. We can create a Desigo CC account, but you cannot define a policy in the background that then makes sure that every 3 months the password is has to be renewed, and we can also not apply a complexity policy. So at the moment, you have tested this for sure once, you can enter admin and password CC. And of course, this wouldn't be allowed in a project where we have validation implemented. So all the Desigo CC accounts should be deactivated, and also the engineers must use personalized Windows accounts. We see here, when it comes to the pharma regulations, we control the access, the temperature, the humidity, airflow, air quality. With food and beverage, it's more or less the same. In addition, we have to check that the odors are not exceeding a particular value, to make sure that our meat tastes like meat and not like fish. And when it comes to banks, museums, here we have then also this intrusion detection, video surveillance, and so on. So this is the story behind, and that means also the message to you: validation can be applied anywhere. We don't just strictly say use it just for pharma projects. In the end, we just have to find a customer who is willing to pay the price for it, because it's a licensed feature and we license the number of objects that we set into validation.